Thank you. So, ani harmishka conditioner cause we kwemko and donjaba, Ottawa and Doji. Hi, my name's Harmony. I'm from Wiki and I live in Ottawa. Welcome to the second last tea and chat of the summer. Our guest of honor today is Fred McGregor. He is a very knowledgeable keeper here that supports various elders, fight keepers. He assists in sharing circles and cross-cultural workshops in universities and in elementary schools. He does a lot of good stuff. I will allow him to introduce himself in his own words. Fred?
Oh my God, now I gotta get serious. I was gonna say, quick, I can Fred Kabooniishin Indigenous. Hang Omamiwinini, Aki, and the Dondonaki, hang Kitigan, Zibi, and Donjabagach. And the way I get times we get Nigi Badnis and Nigi Badin is on Shman, Nigi Witch, what should be on the Tagzi, on Oshmagach. So on the way I get times we get Nigi Badnis yet. My name is Fred Kabooniishin McGregor, Omamiwinini from Kitigan, Zibi. And when one says Ndondanaki, it means land of origin, and that's Omamiwinini is people group from the southeast of the Gatineau and Ottawa rivers. So if you look north, south, if you look eastwards, that's like a territorial area. And this is one of the descriptors in the language that many of you speak. Like same thing. Like when you look behind me, you see up on top, it says Kwe, Sego, Nani, Bojo, Bozo, Tansi, and Wache. Those are the language families and neighbors that I am related to. So the first one is like Kwe and then Sego. Sego is the neighbors and relatives of the Six Nations Confederacy. Nani Bojo, which is Harmony is very familiar with, and Josh and Danny. And then the other one is Tansei. Tansei is the out west Saskatchewan area, and Tansei is like high, and it's how far ranging. And the other one is Cree, Wache. And one of the things is interesting about the language is that of those up there, you see the only different one is the Mohawk, but by Mohawk or part of the Six Nations is it's have relatives to a historical relation to Lake of Two Mountains, which is just before Montreal. If anybody goes to Montreal on the 20, you cross this long bridge and you see when you're going east, you see on your left side, you see the Lake of Two Mountains. So that's where my one of my grandparents on my dad's side has origin, and they come from both Mohawk and Anishinaabe relatives. So I have relations. So when I say this, when I do gatherings like this, and with all of you here, why I say those is greetings to relatives and neighbors. And when they say there's Algonquin and Algonquin, Algonquin is what ethnographers call us, or a large language family, very large. If anybody knows anywhere, knows a little bit of the history, like the Omamiwininis or the what do you call it? The wild rice people, Wisconsin. Wisconsin's our older brothers, Wisconsin. So the Menominee, those are the wild rice men or the wild rice people. So that's as far as the Soto, and that's how far the language goes too, as with Tansi, also Soto. So this is some of the greetings that everyone is familiar with, and it's a recognition of territorial and areas through language. And I think it's important that everybody know or start to get their language and learn some of our own history. And if we haven't have it, you do like Bob Canoe, and he said in his one of his I guess things he says in Old Canada and his heroes. He says go out and talk to grandma or any of those grandpas or aunties, relatives that speak the language or know the history. You speak to them, you'll be able to get some of that, what's important and what's needed in terms of your educational journey, because you see what basically has happened to a lot of us, and we see what happens with the TRC in terms of what happened to residential school and what it did to our language and culture and history. So that's one of the biggest things. But I think the biggest one today too is it's a real challenge for everyone that's out there. One of the things is one of the things today is I'm one of those Indians not from the Wild West. I'm just from the wild pandemic. So everybody's wearing a mask. The cowboys used to wear their handkerchiefs. Now we're all wearing face masks. And I think people used to say about the get worried about the Chinese. They say, oh, they're all wearing masks, And well, this part of the country now in this neck of the woods, we're all wearing these, and it's pretty serious. But I think I'd like to say for everybody, it's good that we're taking the precautions. We're doing all of those. There's that word in the Gazinji, man. We wash our hands, we put on the masks, and we safe distance. And I think we're pretty good in terms of all of our communities across Canada and across Turtle Island, because we know we're like the forgotten aspects in terms of this healthcare system. So we're taking those precautions. So far we're doing really good. So I'm proud of everybody out there that, remember our grandparents. I think Harmony used to remember, or you still do, when you go back to Wiki or you go back to the res, you go visit your grandparents, and it was always the grandma, she'd always have something really nice on the stove or something and say, you want to eat? And I know it's like Josh, when you say that to Josh or some food, you see it lights up. Wow, and the old grandparents, there's one thing I remember grandmas would say, always look at me, Gazin, Jin Mam Chivisni. So eat before, Gazin, Jin. And that was one of the things I remembered, even was only yay high. Gazin, Jin. So, it stays, and it's so funny today, what's happening. In March, I was helping with a course of Algonquin College Environmental Guardianship with First Nation Inuit and Métis students. We were online up until the last 5 courses. And one of the things I was asked when we got back online, and they said, well, let's do an opening. They asked me to do an opening land acknowledgement, so I did one. And this one was very different. Usually you say when you finish, to the 4 directions, miigwech to the 4 directions, you go miigwech, 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 miigwech. Well, I just had to add on there, gazinjig, 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 gazinjig. Wash your hands in the 4 directions, so. But what's funny? I think what's funny in this pandemic time is that for everybody, every one of you out there, you're doing a good job. And one of the things is, it was not only my grandmother, now it's the whole world is washing their hands. So I kind of get a laugh at saying that, well, my grandmother's, or all your grandmother's words are ringing out across Turtle Island and across the world now. Got to wash your hands, and you know what it is. This is my first time with the 7 generations, and I see Harmony laughing, and Josh and everybody else. Danny, when we first started this, there was a lot of technical challenges. But I think everybody is used to the many platforms. And I've done, like Captain Crunch, that whole thing. I've done the rice, snack, crackle, and pop, and you do all of those, you're like a serial killer. You did the Captain In, you did snack, crackle, and pop, and the Cocoa Puff guy's a little leprechaun. Well, this one, you kind of do all, I did the Zoom, I did the Google, and I did all those, I did the Microsoft Teams. So it's really interesting. But I think for every one of you as a younger generation, you're very familiar with the technical aspects to a lot of this. And I think where it really made the difference in terms of social media is when they had the a couple of years ago, if anyone remembers, what was the big one that went around the world? The social media. A whole bunch of ladies there. This is a trick question.
This is on the test.
Yeah. Remember, the ones that was a social media where everybody break out hand drumming and stuff? What was the name of the group? See, Josh's thing can't get it. I'll give you a clue. I'll wait for you. Well, anyways, I think that's where it started from, and I think all of we keep in touch, through social media. And this is important, and like I could see your faces, and I remember when I first started the first 2 weeks with the Algonquin college students, the First Nation students, they wouldn't come on, and there was 12 of us. So I came on, and what you see here is the background. I said I gotta make it interesting, because when you're looking at the background, hey, what do they got, man? It's like, whoa, look at it, So anyways, when they came on, and then they started, so they started putting their faces on, and then so I asked them, I'd like to see you, I'd like to see your face. And what I was just teasing everybody is, oh, I just want to see your face, man. I just want to see like what kind of COVID hair you have, what kind of COVID hairstyle. But what I really wanted to see was for Anishinaabe students was basically just to see if they were smiling, and to see a facial feature, and to see how they're doing. So what it is when they saw my stuff and started teasing, and then they started to smile, and then we discussed a little bit about what was happening. They said, yeah, it's pretty serious, but we see some of the other side, and they were talking about some of their communities, what was happening in their communities. And so we would start like that and get an update, exactly like what you do, and then we'd do a little bit of the course, and then we'd talk at the end of some of the concerns. And one of the things is there was the Inuit students. The Inuit students are saying they're really concerned because they said we haven't had any COVID-19 yet, but we don't have any of the signs yet, so we're pretty good. But we're self-quarantining ourselves. We're taking the precautions because they said if we come down inside, we're not going to be getting into the hospitals or stuff like that. So that was some of the discussions. So it was interesting, and I think last time we tried to do this, Harmony and everybody, we had a little technical difficulty, but I think you're ironing it out now. Like we're using a laptop, and we're using just one, not using the phone. So we figured it out. So which is really good, Harmony, and you have that confidence over now over the social media, which is good, and it shows that you've done this a lot. And one of the things is in the discussions that we had, when not sure what to talk about, you mentioned one of the things, several things, but one of the things I think maybe I'd just like to quickly go over is for every one of you out there, you're doing a good job in that pandemic time. This is almost like 6 months, and now we're starting the school year. I don't know what it's going to be like, but one of the things that happened was told to me, because we had 2 Cree students as well. And one of the things is in March, they were called back to their communities. So they left, but they said, we'll try to get on social media. When they got back to their communities, they said they were about a week in their communities. And what a lot of them left is they left early to go to the goose camps. So I said, wow, and they came on the second and third week, and so they had some internet. They were able to. They said, yeah, we're up at the camp over here, and we're self-isolating. We're staying up longer than usual. We have measures in our communities, but we're taking extra precaution. So that kind of hearing that was pretty good. So we started a discussion, and one of the things that reminded me of this is every one of you out there, if you talk to your kokoms or your mishos or your aunties or uncles, and even the ones that have passed, we lived through the 1919 pandemic. And maybe what I'll do is a really quick little story here. There was once in our community here, I was part of a summer project, and I was asked to interview elders. And because I knew the language as well, they said you have an added benefit. If they not familiar with English, they can tell it to you. It's okay. They can tell you the story in the original language. So I went to visit them, and it was exactly like this. What you call your show? Is it what's your line? Tea and storytelling?
Tea and chat, yeah.
Yeah, tea and chat. So basically, was basically like that, except it was in person and go to the house. So one of the things that this was like a summer long project. Well, I gained about maybe 10 pounds because every time I go over and I have to eat, every time I start telling stories. So some of them were, I'd asked him, what would you like? He says, we heard the stories. We heard, we saw the flyer and that you'd be coming around. So he says, whatever you want. So I'd see every one of them. And there was one of the ladies, I went to see her, and it was like mid-October, and she had a wood stove. Wood stove was going. It was really nice. It was a little damp that day because it was raining and it was a little cool. So it was really nice. And then so I sit down, and every place I go, there was food put in front of me, and there was a tea, So I start. So I asked her, what would you like to tell me, or what would you like to talk about? She goes, I don't really know, but she says, I says, think about it, something that's maybe made an impression or reminded you of something. So while I had my piece of pie and a little bit of tea, then she looked at me, she goes, yes. She goes, I remember I was about, she says, let me think. She says, I'm counting. She says, I was about 5 or 6 years old, or 6 or 7 going on, she says. And she says, where Maniwaki is, the town of Maniwaki, she says, we hunted and trapped in the winter. So she says, we were about maybe 200 clicks, 250 clicks north. And she says, we would come down, we would go in the fall, and we would stay the winter, and the winter, in the spring, we would come down. We'd come down to Maniwaki. It's called Kitigan Zibi Garden River. And one of the things she says, we would come here. I had brothers and sisters, and she says we would stay because it's the meeting of 3 rivers. It was a floodplain, but we wouldn't stay on the floodplain. But what we do is make a garden, and we'd stay where basically the res was. So she says, and one of the things is we would meet everybody, like in the springtime, just like a powwow. She says we would get to meet everybody and find out what's happening. And then we'd stay for the summer, and then by, she says, by late August, last week of August or second week, my dad would start rounding up stuff, provisions, and then we would start going up. We'd go in stages to make the 200 click, 250 click journey. But she says, so that was the routine. We got used to that. And she says, and what I could remember was about that time, she's about 6 years old. She says, we came down in the summer and in the springtime, and we had heard, she says, that people were getting sick. And she says, we heard things and we weren't sure. So we stayed close to, we had a little shack, she says, we called it a little shack, she says, and we stayed, and my dad went into town and my mom, and then when they came back, they had a serious look on their faces. And what had happened is they went to town, pick up provisions, and they would ask for some non-Indigenous friends how they're doing or where they're at, because it was always like a big, And she says some of them, what I was told, she says by my parents, she says some of them had passed. And she says in the spring there was this serious sickness going around. And she says for that time I seen the seriousness on my parents' face. She says we would normally sometimes go to town with them, canoe, and just go right into the town and come back. That was an outing there. That was a day's outing. Well, we didn't go at all. And as the summer wore on, it got more serious. So what had happened was suddenly I hear my dad, she says, picking up provisions quite early, mid-July. I started rounding up provisions, and what he did is he told my dad told my mom that, he says, I'm going up halfway up to the trapping areas, and I'm going to deliver the provisions. "Oh, really?" "Yeah," he says, I'm just have a little concern. So he took off and he went up, delivered half, came back. We stayed a little while longer till about the second week of August. She says, and we would always leave by the first week September or last week of August, but this one we went up second week, and we even took even more stuff in all of us. So she says we went up and we passed the halfway point. So when my dad brought this first stuff at the halfway point, we picked that up and left the one that we just brought. So we made it all the way up to the trapping area. When we got to the trapping area, it was still pretty warm and everything, she said. And my dad went back, started to go get the other stuff. So one of the things she said was we brought everything and we stayed the entire winter and the following. We didn't even come down for the spring and summer. We went right through. And she says when we came back, it was even the 1 year, full year up there. She says when we came back, we saw a lot of friends, non-Aboriginal friends. A lot of them had died. Families, missing children, missing. So we had asked around. Well, he says when you came that year before, that was the start of the sickness. And she says I remember that. So when I had went to see her, so I'm listening and I'm having my tea and having another piece of pie. You know, I didn't even have to ask for it. She brought it. So, anyways, she says what had happened was, she says, so what it is, she told me, she says it was pretty serious. So while I'm there eating, I'm counting. I'm counting back. She was say like 6 years old and she was in her mid-70s. So I figured, it works out. So when I figured it had to be 1918, 1919. She goes, yeah. She goes, she said, that'd be about right. She says, so I was 6 years old, she says. So what had happened was, I told her, I think that's the Spanish flu epidemic. She says, I think that's what it was called, she says. She says, we were lucky, nobody else in our family, we weren't affected because we were quarantined. We went right up in the trap line. We didn't come down. We didn't see anybody else. So that was the one that reminded me. And there was another one just recently before in April. I came home and I was just bicycling, nice weather, and I see my uncle. He lives not too far. So I asked him. I says, "How's it? What's the end of April, beginning of May?" I says, "How's it going?" He says, "We're okay." He says, "But kind of getting used to this." He says, and he says about this distancing, and he says we'll probably have to wear masks. And I says, "Yeah." He says, "I know it's coming whenever we can get them." So he was sitting there, and one of the things he mentioned, he says, was he says, "I remember," and this is on my mom's side. This is my mom's brother. He's still living. And I remember the grandfather on my mother's side is a very prolific storyteller, but he would tell it in the original language, so you had to listen very carefully. And I remember him mentioning that, and then my uncle mentioned that, and he said, "Yeah," he says, "I remember my dad telling me about this." I says, "About what?" He says, "About that thing that happened." He says, "That big flu." And I tell him, "You mean the Spanish flu?" He says, "Yeah, that's the one." He says, what his father told him is that when his dad was a little boy, his family, he says, we heard about it as two. And he says, my parents went into town, or one parent. Then at first it was two parents and one parent. And then when they got in the fall, he said the flu season started, and he says, and there was one time there, he says, we were really sick. We were a family of six, he says, and he says, my dad was about the same age, was about 6 or 7 years old, and he was the only one that could get out of bed. He got out of bed and he went to feed the animals, because we had chickens, we had pigs, we had horses, to water them. And he says, I was only and it was like the start of snow, like November. The snow had started, and he says I was the only one. I didn't feel too good. This is his dad telling him. He says I didn't feel too good, but I could get out of bed. So he says I went out to try to feed as many animals as I could. And he says we were really sick, and he says fevers and the whole bit. But he says none of us died, but everybody was in bed for almost like 2 weeks. He says we lost a lot of weight, and he says we didn't lose any animals, but everybody lost, So that was one of two of the stories. So what they were telling me and what he had told me too, my uncle, he says, yeah, we didn't go to town after. We would try to get someone to bring stuff in, and we didn't go as often, instead of, every 2 weeks, sometimes just once a month, and try to use what we had, because we had gardening and did all of that. So it brings me back to like the TRC, what had happened in residential schools. And then there's that word, that reconciliation. Well, there's the other one that's called resiliency. And I think we have stories of that. We've survived pandemics. And I think this is another good example. And for every one of you out there, you're doing a good job, but you're also keeping an eye on your community, and you're observing if they have curfews, or if they have any of those things, or if you're living in the urban area, you're reminding everybody else, your fellow Anishinabes and other friends. And we're doing a lot of this through social media. So I think there is a resiliency gene in your background and in our backgrounds. And this is one of the things we still can laugh at the same time, make COVID-19 jokes. But at the same time, we've lived through a lot of atrocities in our history, and we lived through pandemics. So we have that experience, and we have that knowledge just to get it back. It's just like in the African communities when they have an Ebola breakout. Today, when you do in the world, what happens today in this world, you can travel anywhere in the world under 24 hours, let alone 12 hours. And this is one of the things how it's spread, because we can get anywhere in the world so quickly. In the old days, you couldn't. But the biggest one in 1918, 1919 was World War I. Everybody was coming back. So that's how we got it, I think, in North America. But today we can travel anywhere at a moment's notice under 12 hours, and they see how quickly it spreads. Well, one of the things that happened is, like in Africa, in traditional villages, Ebola is very serious, very scary. But one of the things they've learned over in their history as well is the person, they live with Ebola. But the thing is, with Ebola, what they do is the people that would get it, they would quarantine them away from the village. They would feed them, but they would do it at arm's length. They would build a little encirclement, keep them in there, but they would send food and water at a distance. So if the person passed, well, that would be the only one, or there would be not very many deaths, but they knew how to isolate it. And that's one of the traditional forms of doing stuff. So they understood. So when you call it, their immunologists looked at that, they say, how did they survive? Well, this is one of the practices that they did. They didn't fully understand that it was viral, or the transmission, but the isolation and distancing, and not touching the stuff that the person touched. It limited the spread. Sure, they would have a couple of casualties, but it saved the whole village. So in our history, I think every one of you, if you ask in your communities and you ask your seniors, elders, kokoms, mishoms, or any of those, I think they would remember a lot of that stuff. They remember the hard times, and they remember the poor times and the struggling times. But we have that resiliency to be able to overcome those. And I think this is one of the things, and the message here is for everyone is not to get discouraged. There's things we have to change our ways, but we're also very adaptable. And I think it's just listening listening to some of those old teachings or stories or stuff that we know. And I think it's getting back that discipline. We have the discipline, and I think it's going back to some of those things, those old ways, in terms of re-examining and saying, yeah, there is merit into a lot of this, and you have to look at it from a different perspective to understand it. Then it makes sense, because it sort of repeats and stuff, and we've gone through those atrocities. And if we didn't have that resiliency, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be here talking to each other, and we wouldn't be these generations that are here. So I think there's a lot of merit in those teachings and stories and understanding. And I think with this tea and bannock, this is something that happens, and people need to hear. And whatever you're doing out there, keep it up. And if things happen, well, you have to deal with it, but deal with it in a logical or sequential fashion, and remember some of those old things. Just like me, oh, I'm collecting all over that now. People are not worried, so I'm going over and asking them, can I get your toilet paper inventory? And I says, can I get your spam as well? You know, you have any extra spam, I'll collect it. And see, you know, anything like that, you know. So I says, so getting ready for the, you know, for the our season, our flu season is coming up. So, but you know, I think I got so used to washing hands and using this and everything else and the distance, I think we forget, but I think we still have to do that. So for me, this is my story, a little bit of for this event, and that comes to mind when I remember that, sitting down with her and saying, you know, wow, she lived through it, so we can live through this. And if we have to take some precautions, and if we lose a couple, well, sometimes that's like what she said, it's just the way it is. And there's an expression in Algonquin, we're going to get through this. Jabwi, I mean, it's like going through it. When you get through it, you can see. So we still have yet the winter, fall and winter, but so far I think our numbers are good, and we took some serious measures in our communities. We had checkpoints, we had blockages, we had quarantining, we had curfews. I think you know, and sometimes some people didn't agree with it, but I think we understand. And I think even like in Standing Rock, when they had the Sturgis rally just last week, I think the Standing Rock community down there, or one at our Window Rock, told the non-Indigenous people, you're not passing through here. We're, you know, and I think they understood, as poor as they are, and as sometimes as how do you say, forgotten as they are, they stood and said, okay, yeah, we've had these standoffs, but we're standing off. We're not backing down on this one, because we're not going to get the health care. So we better ensure. So now when we see the numbers, because of that gathering, it's starting to spread, and we see the numbers in the States. So up here, I think we're doing a little bit better, but I think in the Anishinaabe community so far, so good. We've had some incidences, but I think we're, you know, so I think for everybody out there, for everyone, you know, keep it up and don't get discouraged. And sometimes write these things that you see or feel, because this is going to be a historic time when every one of you is like 70 years old. You'll be like Josh and Harmony, and you know, I'll be long gone by then, but you'll be there. You know, you'll be elders your turn and saying, "Oh yeah, I remember the pandemic of 2020." See, you'll tell stories. You know, yeah, we were on social media. You know, so
I'll
you
be
know,
showing them this YouTube video.
yeah. You'll be hanging on to this, and you say, "Oh, look what you look like. That was social media. Wow." And I think we are quite adaptable. I think that's how the resilience is being that adaptable. People try to peg us that we should be stoic and we should be back in history and all that, but I think we've been adaptable. If we weren't, we wouldn't be here. And this resiliency. So that says a lot. Sometimes don't give credit to ourselves, and we don't give credit to each other, and the general public looks at us, we're way forgotten in the background. And but we were first here on this land. We still take care of it, and it's taking care of us, so we know what needs to be done. And sometimes there are things that we don't comprehend yet, but sometimes we have to deal with those. And I think this is the one time. So we were nearly decimated, but we're still resilient. And I think that's things that we got to remember. We got to go back and select those things. So for me, I'm just proud of everybody that that's hearing or listening, that whatever you're doing, continue it. Don't lose face, and continue to talk to your communities, your elders, or wherever you are, and remind people. People have to be reminded, that wash your hands, do all this stuff, because but this is one of those things, and it tends to repeat. If you go 1919 to 2020, there's things that come up. It repeats itself. So I think that's it for me. I got 6:46 there. I don't know if you have any questions, or if you want to ask anything. Don't be shy.
Yeah, you're crushing it. That was really interesting. I really like the part about like how we should write things down. I know for me, I started keeping a journal during the pandemic, and what I wrote in March is so different from what I'm writing now.
Exactly.
I was so productive, and now I'm just whatever.
Yeah.
I'm just so used to this, not as busy as I was.
Yeah.
So I guess my question was going to be, what have you been doing to keep busy during this time?
Well, first of all, I've been keeping busy by doing all the stuff outside that needs to be done around the house to get ready for winter, just like an old person, okay? Just like everybody. If you live in the rural area, you got wood to split, you got wood to pile, you got to look at the house and do all that stuff. Before, I used to do it haphazardly, never get it done because I was either working or whatever. So this one now gives me all of that time. So, and in between these, like this little presentation, I got a couple of others. It takes 1 or 2 days. But before, I wasn't able to do it wholeheartedly, but now I can. So this allows, and one thing I notice is that when I look around, people have time for each other. Doesn't matter where. I was in Ottawa yesterday, and I seen this couple. They're at the stop sign waiting for somebody. Next thing you know, they're just hugging on a street corner under a stop sign, and they're just looking around, and they're not rushing. Other times, if it was before the pandemic, you'd never see that. They'd be just rushing by, and etc. So people have, if they wait in lines, they don't get mad. It's just things. So they don't have anything to go to anyways. Because if you're going to do it, you're going to be doing it in a line, and you're going to be waiting. So So I think it's just been doing the Anishinaabe way of just keeping busy and doing all those things that you normally want to do. And the other one is, I think for your generation, I think you're a bunch of writers. So what I ended up doing is doing it on as a digital recorder. Is recording some of this stuff in terms of what's going on in terms of what I remember with the pandemic. But I think it's like harmony, and every one of you out there, if you're writing it, you're going to look back on this, you'll see this, and when you started in March to now, I'm sure there's a very difference in writing. And one of the things that gets every one of you here is that you're on social media. One of the things I learned and I observed is that as Indigenous students and pursuing education, in my generation, writing was never encouraged. And but you hear the language, the oral language, and when you go to school, the Indians they don't write very much. They're not encouraged like the non-Indigenous. So one of the things is we're not writers, but your generation is. Why? Because you're on social media, but also you're on stuff like not only TikTok but Facebook, and you're on these. So when you do text, you got to be brief. You got to be to the point. You want to save letters because you don't want So you're used to writing, but you're not used to the oral. Okay, so it's just the flip side. So I think it's getting that back. But I think with this, like what you're doing here is getting some of that back. Um, I remember when I seen some of you, you were very shy when you got on this on this venue here. I think even Harmony was a little shy, but now you're very comfortable in front of the screen. You're laughing and telling jokes and everything else. Before when you started, it was like, So I think that's what this one does. I think it gets us. We still can socialize, but I think we still need the face to face. I think this is one of the things we have, that flexibility, and this is technology. And I think a lot of us use more technology uh, than we see. A lot of us, some of the younger ones, are on TikTok and everywhere else, the latest stuff. So that's one of the advantages.
Oh, I was totally shy on all media platforms, but I adapted.
Yeah, well, like people ask me, how did you get the way you are? I said, what do you mean? And he says, you're crazy. I said, no, I'm not. I says, what it is, and they said, how did you end up emceeing? I says, I went to, I used to go to some really good events, but they had a lousy MC. And this was even before I got into powwows. So I said, okay, if you're going to invite that many people, or if you're going to have an audience, then you better have some material, and you better, like entertain or inform them. If you can't entertain them, inform them. So I took that approach, and if I did anything like sound or music, make sure whoever you're supporting or helping, the artists or musicians, do a good job. So that's one of the things. This is, well, when you do so many of these, after a while, you get to understand audiences, and you get to understand, you can read your crowds, you can read where you're at. So that's one of the things. And I think everyone has that potential possibility. It's just being overcoming the shyness, and being able to express yourself, but being able to think and speak at the same time. Some people, they can't do it impromptu. Well, over time, just by experience, you think sequentially, and what's I'm going to say, or how am I going to say it, and then you just say it. So it just experience. And I see, like yourself, Harmony, it's more relaxing. You come across, so you're getting used to interviewing, or you're getting used to with social media, and that's a confidence builder, but that's just experience, because now this is one of the mediums, and I think this is going to be a medium that we're going to have for quite a while here, until we get a vaccine, and with these precautions. And this is the kind of where we're going to get. We still get to see, our relatives. It's just depending on what kind of internet you have.
I guess if you can't inform or be humorous, just have a really nice background.
That too. When the students came over, I had toilet paper hanging there, a couple of rolls and stuff, and I could see them, and like, they weren't looking at me, they were just looking, wow, and then they were starting to read, because like over here in the back, like I put SARS, H1N1, and MERS, and COVID. We don't know, but we went through SARS, and we went through H1N1 and MERS, so we'll see what. That's why I put it up. It's just to remind people. People were telling me, I had funny thing is, we had a meeting. I had a meeting just before everything was shut down, because I was part of a review committee. Okay, so what the Inspire Awards? Okay, it was held at downtown. Okay, the hotel not too far from the Shaw Center, right across the NAC. Well, my son and my wife were part of the procession. Okay, so I went along. So in the hotel, that same hotel, I'm looking around. I says, "Holy shit, man! There's a lot of brown people here." And there's like big brown men, and there's short little brown men, and there's lots of brown women and everything, And I got on the elevator one afternoon, and it's like, oh my God, I was the shortest one there and the skinniest one there, and they all get, and then I look at their jackets and I don't recognize. So I asked them, I says, where are you from and what's happening? And so they all looked down at me, you know. I says, oh, they said, yeah, we're in for the wrestling tryouts for Japan. This is the last qualifying round. So we're all in Ottawa and we're all staying in this hotel. And the qualifying rounds are happening around the city, and we go meet at the Shaw Center. He says, oh, okay. He says, we've been here for the week and a half. So anyways, I'm used to that. So I'm used to all of that week. And then the following week, I was asked midweek to be part of this review committee. And this when COVID-19 breaks up, I go over there. My wife drops me off, and there's nobody. The streets are deserted, and there's only 2 people in the hotel at the reception. You know, and I get on the elevator, there's nobody in the elevator, and I go up to the room, and it's kind of eerie, you know, I don't see anybody else. I open the door, you know, everything's there, and it's like, okay. I don't hear, I look down, I look down, I'm on the 12th floor, I don't see any traffic. You know, and I go to bed, like I pull the covers over and I usually hear stuff. I hear doors banging and people yelling and everything, you know. I don't even hear that. I get up in the morning and, you know, and I says, okay. I go for a quick walk and there's nobody in the streets. There's not even a homeless person. So I come back, I says, I try to find breakfast. I says, do you have breakfast? He said, yeah, but it's just a bag lunch. So I ate that. So I went to the meeting, but they had stuff prepared. So in the evening, I go back. I ordered. I says, the organizers of my meeting told me you couldn't do room service. We'll just bill it. And I said, I don't know if I want to do room service. So I get room service. The person comes back with a gloves and a mask and gives me a bag, knocks on the door, leaves the bag at the door and stands back. I open the door. He says, there's your order. So I pick up the thing and and it's all plastic spoons, forks, knife, and there's my meal. And I get a napkin, etc. And there's still no people. So I go down, so I go to sleep again. I don't hear anybody on my floor. So the people I'm with in the meeting says, how's it going? I says, I'm getting scared, but I saw some SARS zombies. He says, SARS zombies? Yeah, he says, they were running around, and I says, they looked at me. So I hurry up and ran into my room and I listened. I didn't hear any, but I heard them pass by. I says, but so I told the people down at the front desk at the hotel, I says, I saw some SARS zombies. What do I do? SARS zombies? I says, they're not COVID-19 zombies. They're SARS zombies. I think they're leftover from SARS. They were looking at me and they started laughing. I think this guy's nuts, So anyways, I tell them, and so in the morning, one of the girls, she goes, so you okay? I says, yeah. I says, I figured it out. I says, what do you mean? I said, I'm not scared of SARS zombies. I saw them the other day, but you know what I did? When I saw that SARS zombie at the end of the hall, I locked my door and I went online. I went to Google and I found a picture of Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. And when I saw the SARS zombie the next day, I says, I saw him at the end of the hall. I showed him a picture like that of Keith Richards or Mick Jagger. They took off running. You see, I took off running the other way because the SARS one, that's when the Rolling Stones did the last. You remember that? And last year, last fall, the Rolling Stones did their other concert. So, people have put two and two together. So I says, that's my COVID-19 experience, and that's what I remember. So I think you're just about that time, or if there's any other questions or anything, by all means, feel free.
Joss, did you have any last questions? I think we're just about done then.
I see smoke in the background there, Josh. I don't know what you're cooking. You better go check it there. Oh, he says he went like this. He says he got 5 wieners on. Okay. They're boiling. Okay, I understand.
That is Fred McGregor, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us with our tea and chat. I am going to end the recording now.
Okay. I'm gonna try and do the same.